good evening and a warm welcome to State of Business on our television. I'm Soundri Jayawardena. Let's look at the top stories for the day. The High Commissions of Pakistan and India in Sri Lanka celebrate their 73rd Independence Day. Policy backsliding in Sri Lanka impedes its image on the international business arena, says Professor of Economics. News in detail. The High Commissions of Pakistan and India in Sri Lanka held colorful flag hoisting ceremonies to mark their 73rd Independence Day at the High Commission's premises yesterday and today. The High Commissioner, retired Major General Dr. Shahid Ahmad Hashmat, hoisted the national flag to celebrate the day. The High Commissioner highlighted that the government of Pakistan has decided to observe this year's Independence Day as Kashmir's Solidarity Day to express Pakistan's moral, political and diplomatic support and solidarity with Kashmiris in their just and fair freedom struggle from Indian occupation. On Sri Lanka-Pakistan relations, the High Commissioner said that Pakistan attaches great importance to its relations with Sri Lanka, which are based on mutual respect, understanding and close cooperation, and he further said that Pakistan will assist Sri Lanka with regard to Sri Lanka's national security and territorial integrity. Accordingly, India celebrated its 73rd Independence Day at the High Commission's premises today, and the High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, Sri Taranjit Singh Sandhu, hoisted the national flag to celebrate the day. Over the past few years, the relationship between Sri Lanka and India became stronger. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Sri Lanka thrice in the last 4 years, and his first visit in March 2015 was the first by an Indian Prime Minister in 28 years. Indian Prime Minister was the first world leader to visit Sri Lanka just 3 weeks after the Easter Sunday attacks. Professor of Economics of International University of Japan, Dr. N.S. Kure, states that the governmental apparatus of Sri Lanka since independence has failed in many times, whereas the civil society of Sri Lanka is becoming immensely active. Speaking exclusively to our television, Dr. N.S. Kure stresses that Sri Lanka needs to work on shaping its national identity.
So, what I want to say, the government has failed in many areas since independence. People don't trust the government now, and our government institutional mechanism has failed. I'm not blaming all the government institution, but if you look at the recent the East attack, who is responsible for that? Everybody is blaming someone else, so they are not taking responsibility. So the people don't have trust on any government institutional mechanism. So therefore, the civil society has taken some responsibility in recent time. For example, you know that the cardinal has basically cooled down the situation, domestic situation and the international situation. So that's a good example for strong civil society activities. The Buddhist monk has expressed their views, and so civil society also getting that. Exactly. And at the same time, when we look at the recent development, we don't have national identity. In fact, we have to think of who we are. Are we Sri Lankans, or whether we are multi-ethnic, multicultural society? We have to have a kind of national identity.
Moreover, Professor of Economics of International University of Japan, Dr. N.S. Kure, went on to say that the development of any country is mainly dependent on the policies and the qualified policymakers. Nevertheless, while drawing references to Japan's successful policymaking processes, Dr. Kure elaborated that policy backsliding in Sri Lanka impedes its image on the international business arena.
So basically, the development of a country depends on policies. Who are going to make policies? It is qualified policymakers. And of course, you can put politicians also when it comes to the policy making process. And let me just give you a very interesting example from Japan. So if you look at the MITI, Ministry of Trade and Industry, so the policies basically that Japan implemented is taken by strong bureaucrats. But what we see in Sri Lanka is a policy backsliding. New political parties comes, they change the previous government policies, and then the investors don't like that kind of thing. So we have failed in getting enough investment when compared with like Vietnam and some other countries. And you know, if you look at the Cambodia, And the Korea, for example, World Bank described Korea as a failure case after World War II. And Sri Lanka they saw as a kind of promising nation, but now it is the opposite.
The Cabinet has approved a proposal to present a vote on account to allocate state expenditure during the first quarter of next year, since it will be unrealistic to present a fully fledged budget in the wake of a presidential election. The government had earlier presented a vote on account for the first quarter of this year because a fully fledged budget could not be passed in Parliament amidst the political turmoil in the aftermath of the 52-day government which took office in October last year. Subsequently, the presidential election campaign will take place during the period of this year's annual budget. Accordingly, the newly elected president will also have the authority to dissolve the parliament after March next year, and it is against such a background that the government announced that it should be left for a new government that takes office next year to present a fully fledged budget. Meanwhile, during the cabinet meeting held last Tuesday, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the promotion of drying technology among paddy farmers for utilization of earning potentiality. The Cabinet also approved the proposal presented by the President Maithripala Sirisena upon the request of non-Cabinet Minister of Economic Reforms and Public Distribution to provide 2 metric ton mobile dryer worth 3 million rupees and 6 metric tons fixed dryer worth 6 million rupees to 5 farmer organizations in Polonnaru as selected by the Department of Agrarian Services with the assistance of All Island Paddy Millers Association with a mechanism to recover the costs incurred by the government. Stay tuned for more news after this break. Welcome back after the break. The European Commission, through its instrument contributing to stability and peace, has planned to allocate €8.5 million to back Sri Lankan efforts to prevent violent extremism, build community resilience and promote peace and tolerance. The statement of European Commission issued yesterday highlights that the allocation would contribute to the ongoing peace-building process through internally displaced persons and refugees being able to return to their lands. This allocation comes after High Representative and Vice President Federica Mogherini's meeting happened this month with the Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka, where she underlined the EU's readiness to support Sri Lanka in the face of the challenges of terrorism and violent extremism. The statement went on to say that the Easter Sunday terrorist attacks in Sri Lanka killed 258 people, causing injuries to many more, and preventing such terrorist attacks is an additional challenge for Sri Lanka amidst other challenges such as refugees, internally displaced persons, and land identified as potentially contaminated with mines and explosive remnants. The €8.5 million Commission support will follow a three-pronged approach. It will support Sri Lankan policymakers in their mission to prevent and respond to terrorist threats and attacks in a human rights compliant manner. Secondly, it will also support relevant local stakeholders to propagate positive awareness-raising campaigns, and it will contribute to the last stages of mine clearance in the 3 northern districts of Sri Lanka and focus on peace building to reinforce national cohesion and reconciliation. The Department of Census and Statistics says that the country's industrial activity grew 2.2% in June 2019 from a year earlier, with a growth in petroleum refining. The index of industrial production of the Census and Statistics Department grew to 107.3 points in June 2019 from 105 points a year earlier. According to official data by the State Department, industrial activity had also grown 1.2% in June from a month earlier, while the country is fighting to recover from the damages by Easter Sunday attack. Food production, which is Sri Lanka's largest industry comprising of over a third of manufacturing activity, fell by a marginal 0.1% in June 2019 to 102.5 points from a year earlier. Apparel manufacturing, the country's largest export and making up nearly 2% of industry, grew 2.8% to 116.8 points. Non-metal mineral production, comprising of 7.8% of industrial activity, grew 17.3% to 122.9 points. Production of coke and refined petroleum, which is just as large, grew 22.3% to 113.4 points. Rubber and plastic product making, the fifth largest industry making up 5.7% of the total, fell 19.5% to 94 points. The fastest growing industry during the month was paper production, rising 42.7% to 112.7 points. Fabricated metal production, meanwhile, fell 24.6% to 95.8 points. Accordingly, the second quarter of 2019 showed activities which are growing marginally by 0.6% to 103.4 points, as the country's industrial sector recorded the steepest fall in April since the index began in 2016 due to the Easter Sunday explosions. Minister P. Harrison states the third largest reservoir in the country will be constructed in Anuradhapura at a cost of 38 billion rupees. The minister disclosed this while participating in the commencement of rehabilitation work on several tanks in Horopatana electorate recently. Agriculture Minister P. Harrison said the government expects to restore 700 small tanks in the Anuradhapura district this year. He said the Malwatu Oya River will be diverted from Tantirimale to create the third largest reservoir in the island. The project will commence under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe on the 25th of this month. According to the minister, 8,000 hectares can be cultivated additionally with the construction of the new reservoir, and farmlands up to Mana can be supplied with water from the envisaged project. Meanwhile, Minister Harrison said the guaranteed price of paddy will be increased by 5 rupees to help the lifestyles of the paddy farmers. Disaster Management Center, quoting the National Building Research Organization, announces the residents to be alert on the possibility of landslides, slope failures, rock falls, cut failures and ground subsidence if the rains continue in the Ratnapura Divisional Secretariat Division and surrounding areas in the coming hours. Here, Deputy Director of Disaster Management Center, Pradeep Kodipalli, explaining on the current situation.
People has to pay a lot of attention over the water levels of the rivers and when they are using and utilizing the water of these particular rivers. So as per the irrigation department, and Met department announces that several spells will be expected in the northern, eastern and over and some western area as well, and the sea areas could also be roughed and extending from Pothuville to Mana via Hambantota via Colombo and Puttalam. And sudden increase of wind speed could also be expected 60 kilometers per hour in from Pothuville to Hambantota. In between 7th of this month up to now, 2,176 houses been damaged as partially and 14 houses been damaged fully. So the funds already been released by the Minister of Disaster Management to the district secretaries after the assessment. So all the funds will be released to the as per the damages occurred in a few days back time. The NBRO that they have issued a warning over the possibility of landslide and cutting failure in Noreli district and Kalutara district and the Kegol district as well and Ratnapura district. So still the warning not being taken off.
Stay tuned for stock updates after this break. Welcome back after the break. Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a negative note today. The all-share price index dropped 32.15 points to close at 5,917.15, and the S&P SL20 dropped 49.61 points to close at 2,904.59. The turnover was 1 billion rupees and over 35 million rupees shares were traded. Up next are forex rates. That's all news for today. Do join us tomorrow with State of Business on our television. Until then, take care. Good night.